When you compare those two grays, you see a sense of depth in the color in the one that's made with various different layers of color, as opposed to the single color of gray that you've mixed on your palette. Hey everyone, I'm Marianne Mitchell. Welcome to Whole Artist Mastery. So many artists who are working with me, as well as many of you on YouTube who enjoy watching what I have to say on a weekly basis, have expressed interest in achieving luminosity in their paintings. So it's interesting to me that so many people are wanting to create luminosity. I think maybe it's a way to bring light to the darkness in our world, which is always the case. There's always dark, there's always light. And so we are searching for light at this time, I believe, to give us hope, to make us feel whole in the midst of so much darkness. And that's one of the reasons that I'm creating luminosity in my work, because I feel inside a need to do so. And I also feel like I'm contributing to the balance in the world between dark and light. So today I'm going to get into the composition of how you create luminosity in oil painting. What are the components that you need to be aware of, to put together so that you can achieve that depth of luminosity in your oil paintings? The way I'm going to describe the different components of luminosity to you is with terms that I've actually come up with in my own exploration of how to create luminosity in my work. So you may be familiar with the terms that I'm using. This may be the first time you've ever heard them, but they have come about through my search to find ways to explain to those who are working with me how all this comes together. So the first component I'm going to talk about is color depth. What does that mean? You create color depth with several different layers on top of each other of different colors working together so that the end result is a color that has depth in it, as opposed to having a single color that may be the gray that you've been looking for, but it's a flat gray as opposed to a similar gray that you can arrive at with using 3 or 4 colors or 5 colors working together, so that when you compare those two grays, you see a sense of depth in the color in the one that's made with various different layers of color, as opposed to the single color of gray that you've mixed on your palette. So the result of making color depth is color light. In other words, when you have a color that has depth in it, it radiates a sense of light in it because there are different colors working together that create that light. So together, different ways of creating light in your color, or different relationships of colors that have depth in them, create light. And those different color lights come together in part to create an overall sense of luminosity. The other part of creating an overall sense of luminosity is what I call the relationship between subordinate and dominant colors. So what does that mean? So subordinate colors, or reflected colors, are weaker colors that are reflecting the dominant, saturated, or more intense color, so that there's movement and light that's being created between the dominant, more saturated color and the subordinate or more reflected color. Now, the thing about this is that you can have, let's say, a really saturated red and a reflected green, because those colors are opposite each other, they create light together. You can also have a dominant or saturated red and a reflected subordinate kind of a pink that relates to the red, that is analogous but is a more pastel, weaker, reflected color to the dominance of that red. So you can make this happen with all the different opposite colors. So purple and yellow, you can have an intense purple with a reflected creamy yellow, or a very light lavender holding the intense yellow. And then you can also have like a very cool peachy color, which is reflecting an intense blue. You can also have the reverse. You can have like a very light powder blue that's holding an intense orange area. Now, they don't always have to be opposite of each other. So for instance, again, you can have a really gorgeous, glowing, intense orange that's being held by the cooler or the weaker, more subordinate, reflected orange. And so by having them in relationship to each other, you're also creating color light. So by putting together colors that have a depth in them, that have movement within the color, you're creating color light. And by having colors that have a relationship between intense and more reflected, you're also creating color light. So the sum of all these different color relationships in your painting is what creates the luminosity in the work. So I'm going to use two paintings of mine to illustrate what I'm talking about for you. This painting is titled Unvarnished Awe. So rather than getting into an explanation of the titles, I'm going to jump right in and explain the composition of luminosity in this painting. Now, if you look in the upper right quadrant, there's a sense of depth, of color depth in this purpley gray, slightly pink, mauvey color. And the reason why I'm unable to come up with a singular color name is because there are several different colors working together in this area that create the overall effect of a purpley gray, pinky gray color. And so this is in relationship to the brighter orangey yellow down here. So why is that? Well, purple is opposite yellow, and the warmth of this orangey pink area is also talking to the strength of the orangey yellow area down here. So this color is what I would call a reflected color of the more intense dominant color of the yellow-orange down here. Now on the other side, I have this pink here, and so this pink is also talking to this more orangey pink, but there's another area that it's in relationship with, and that is this reddish brown in here in the dark brown area of the painting. So if you take your finger and hold it up and knock out this reddish brown, I'm going to give you a minute to do that. Look up here in the left quadrant of the painting and how this pink color has less vibrancy to it. It feels also more like it's coming forward and dominates. Now take your finger away and you can see how this is being held by this color down here. Now conversely, take your finger and knock out the pink in the upper left quadrant. Now this color down here, the reddish brick red burnt sienna color, you can see more so, and it feels like it's sticking out a little bit more without it having a friend, without it being in relation to another color. So together, they are creating vibrant movement, which I would call luminosity. Now, there's one more relationship I want to point out here, and that again has to do with the dominant yellow-orange here and the subordinate, very creamy yellow in the white here, which is reflecting the orangey yellow here. So this is the same color talking to each other, only one is very light and reflecting the more dominant saturated color. And that is also true with the warm pink color here and the warm burnt sienna here. So those are analogous colors, colors that are the same, and yet one is more intense and one is less intense. And then here we have the opposite color, which is a purpley gray, talking to the more intense orangey yellow down here. The title of this painting is There. And by the way, both of these paintings are oil on panel, 24 inches square. So what are we going to talk about here? So obviously it seems that this is the central focal point of the painting, this great luminous center surrounded by all these different neutral colors. But the reason this appears so glowingly is because of the color relationships that it is engaged with. So what do I mean by that? On the left side, this whitish gray area actually has flecks of this turquoise aqua color that is intense just to the right of it, right along this edge here. So before I put a glaze of this aqua turquoise color in the white, these two areas were flatter. They had less color depth and less luminosity. So by adding this aqua turquoise glaze into the white, suddenly these two colors really had a sense of movement and light between them. Similarly, this yellow became much more interesting and much more luminous when I added a yellow glaze on top of the brown neutral color over here. So before there was this orangey sort of raw sienna color put on top of the brown, the color was more like this here, which made the yellow in this area much flatter. So those are two really important relationships between similar colors, but one is less intense than the other, and one is cooler than the other, which is warmer. So again, having the warm and cool and the similar colors working together in the entire painting gives a sense of luminosity. By the way, if you're interested in learning more about color relationships, how to mix different colors, how to create color depth by making color sandwiches, I offer the workshop Simplifying Colors for Painters on the Whole Artist Mastery website. So if you go to the website, go to the online workshops page, and you'll find the Simplifying Color for Painters online workshop there. However, also next week, I'm going to be showing you how to create color sandwiches, which is my definition for creating color depth by using different colors and layering them together. And that's what I call a color sandwich. So stay tuned for that. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I hope this was helpful. And thanks very much for watching.